The March frost still clung to the soil around Lake Minnetonka, but Catherine Williams could feel spring stirring beneath her gardening gloves. At 72, she'd learned to read the seasons in her bones the way her arthritis eased when warmth was coming. How the light fell differently through her kitchen window when winter finally loosened its grip. She knelt beside her prized rose bushes, the ones Bob had planted for their 25th anniversary. "Dorothy Perkins," he'd said with a grin, "just like that actress you always liked." But these weren't Dorothy Perkins roses, they were Eden climbers, pale pink and resilient. Bob never could tell one flower from another, but he'd known she loved roses, and that had been enough. The phone rang from inside the house, cutting through the quiet morning air. Kate pulled off her gloves and hurried in, hoping it wasn't another automated call about her car warranty. "Mom!" The voice stopped her cold. Mike hadn't called in 3 months. Not since Christmas, when he'd stayed exactly 45 minutes, checking his phone every few seconds and leaving before dessert. "Mike, honey, what a surprise." She settled into the kitchen chair by the window, where she could still see her garden. "I've been thinking about you, Mom, about how hard you've been working, how much you've sacrificed." His voice carried that smooth tone he used when he wanted something. But there was something else underneath urgency. Maybe. Kate's heart fluttered despite herself. How long had she waited to hear words like these? "You remember how you used to talk about Japan when I was a kid? The cherry blossoms in Kyoto." She did remember. It had been one of her dreams with Bob, the trip they'd planned for retirement. But Bob's heart attack at 58 had ended many dreams. "I booked you a trip, Mom, for your birthday next week. First-class flights, beautiful hotel. You deserve this." Kate stared out at her roses, trying to process the words. "Mike, that's incredibly generous, but no buts. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Dad, me, your patients at the hospital. It's time someone took care of you." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke her. She'd worked as a night shift nurse for 30 years, picking up extra shifts to pay for Mike's college, his car, his wedding. She'd never complained, never asked for recognition. And now? "You really mean it?" "Of course. Mom, I've already booked everything. Business class, 5-star hotel. Just say yes." Kate looked around her small lakeside house, at the photos of Mike's graduation, his wedding, her grandchildren she rarely saw. When had she last done something just for herself? "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'd love that." But as she hung up, a tiny voice in the back of her mind whispered a question she didn't want to hear. Why now? That evening, Kate called her best friend, Sarah Peterson, who lived 2 houses down and had been her confidant since Bob's death. "A trip to Japan." Sarah's voice carried skepticism. "That's awfully expensive. Kate?" And sudden, "He said I deserve it." Kate folded laundry in her bedroom, holding up the blue blouse Mike used to say made her eyes sparkle. Maybe he's finally growing up. "Honey, you know I love you." But when has Mike ever been spontaneous about anything except asking for money? The words stung because they were true. Mike's startup had failed 2 years ago, and he'd borrowed $8,000 from Kate's savings. She'd never seen it again. "People change, Sarah." "They do," Sarah agreed gently. "I just want you to be careful. Have you seen any actual reservations?" "Tickets." Kate paused in her folding. "He said everything's digital now. He'll handle all the details." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "Maybe I'm overthinking," Kate said quickly. He sounded so sincere. But late that night, As she lay in the bed she'd shared with Bob for 20 years, Kate stared at the ceiling and wondered why a gift that should have felt like love somehow felt like goodbye. The next morning brought rain and doubt in equal measure. Kate stood in her closet, pulling out clothes she hadn't worn in years, the good silk scarf Bob bought her in Chicago, the pearl earrings from her nursing school graduation. She packed and repacked her suitcase, each fold of fabric an act of faith in her son's sudden generosity. Around noon, Sarah appeared at her door with homemade banana bread and worried eyes. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Sarah said, settling at Kate's kitchen table. "Something doesn't sit right." Kate poured coffee, using her good china. Everything felt ceremonial lately, as if she were preparing for something momentous. "What do you mean? Mike's been struggling financially, hasn't he? The startup collapse, the mortgage on that big house." "That's exactly why this is so meaningful," Kate protested. "He's making sacrifices to do something nice for me." Sarah studied her friend's face. "Kate, when was the last time Mike called just to see how you were not needing something, not rushing off the phone, just calling?" Kate opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. She couldn't remember. "I'm not trying to be negative," Sarah continued. "I just think you should have backup plans. Cash, documents, contact information." That evening, Mike arrived for their planned birthday dinner. Kate had made reservations at Antonio's, the cozy Italian place where she and Bob used to celebrate anniversaries. But Mike was already on his phone when she answered the door. "Change of plans. Mom, I found this great new place downtown. Really modern. Fantastic reviews." Kate looked down at her carefully chosen outfit, the blue blouse, her good pearls. "But I already made reservations." "You can cancel." He was typing as he spoke. "Trust me, you'll love this place." The restaurant was everything Antonio's wasn't: stark white walls, harsh lighting, minimalist tables that felt cold to the touch. The noise level made conversation difficult, which seemed fine with Mike since he spent most of the meal texting. "Is everything all right?" Kate asked, raising her voice over the ambient music that sounded like industrial machinery. "Just work stuff." He didn't look up. "You know how it is." But she didn't know. He never told her about his work anymore, never shared his struggles or victories. When had her son become this stranger who sat across from her like he was serving a sentence halfway through their meal? Mike's phone rang. "Sorry, Mom. Important call." Shuts. He disappeared for nearly an hour, leaving Kate alone with her cooling pasta and the stares of servers who clearly needed their table. When he returned, he acted as if nothing had happened. "How's your food?" "Fine," she said quietly. The word tasted like resignation. As they prepared to leave, Kate asked the question she'd been holding all evening. "Mike, could you print out the hotel information and flight details just in case my phone dies?" He sighed. "Mom, everything's digital now. I've got it all on my phone. You worry too much. But what if—" "Relax." The word came out sharper than he probably intended. "I've got everything handled. Just enjoy the trip." Walking to their cars, Kate tried once more. "Will you be joining me at some point? It would be wonderful to see Kyoto together." Mike was already reaching for his car door. "We'll see. I'll be working remotely, so maybe—" No hug goodbye. No happy birthday. Just the sound of his engine starting and the sight of his taillights disappearing into the Minneapolis night. Kate sat in her car for a long time before driving home, trying to convince herself that the hollow feeling in her chest was just nerves about traveling alone. What Kate didn't know was that 3 blocks away, Mike Williams sat in his car in a grocery store parking lot, his hands shaking as he stared at his phone screen. The bank balance showed $247.83. The mortgage payment of $3,200 was due in 5 days. His startup, TechFlow Solutions, had burned through investor money like kindling. The revolutionary app that was supposed to streamline small business operations had been a spectacular failure. Worse, he'd personally guaranteed some of the business loans, putting his house and his family's future at risk. His wife Jennifer had taken the kids to her mother's house 3 weeks ago. "Until you figure this out," she'd said, her voice hollow with disappointment. She didn't know about the second mortgage he'd taken out, or the credit cards he'd maxed out trying to keep the business alive. Mike opened his laptop and pulled up the email thread he'd been building for months. It started innocently enough, a conversation with his Aunt Susan about his concern for his mother's well-being. "She forgot to pay her property taxes last year," he'd written. "Had to be reminded twice, and she's been repeating herself a lot lately." It wasn't entirely untrue. Kate had forgotten the property taxes because the county had sent the notice to an old address and she'd never received it. And yes, she sometimes told the same stories, but that was because Mike rarely listened the first time. He scrolled through months of carefully crafted messages to relatives, family friends, even Kate's doctor. Each email painted a picture of a woman slowly losing her grip on reality, becoming a danger to herself and others. The Japan trip was the final piece of his plan. With Kate stranded overseas, confused and helpless, he'd have the perfect evidence that she needed a guardian, someone responsible, someone who could manage her assets, the lake house worth $400,000, the life insurance policy she thought he didn't know about, the savings account she'd built from decades of night shifts and frugal living. All he needed was for her to fail, to prove that she couldn't handle independence anymore. Mike closed the laptop and drove home to his empty house, telling himself he was saving his mother from herself. But in the darkness of his bedroom, staring at the ceiling he might lose within weeks, he knew the truth. He wasn't saving anyone. He was drowning, and he'd decided to pull his mother under with him. The next morning, Kate Williams finished her packing with the methodical care of a woman who'd spent her life preparing for emergencies. She included her passport, medications, comfortable shoes, and a small bag of gifts for Mike's children, handmade bookmarks, and a picture book about Japanese gardens. At the bottom of her suitcase, she tucked a photo of Bob taken at their favorite restaurant, his smile as warm as summer sunshine. "Wish you were coming with me," she whispered to the image. As her taxi pulled away from the lake house the next morning, Kate didn't see Mike's car parked around the corner, didn't know he was watching to make sure she actually left. She waved at Sarah's house and settled back in her seat, heart full of nervous excitement. Behind her, Mike Williams smiled for the first time in months. Phase 1 was complete. The flight to Kyoto was everything Mike had promised: business-class comfort, attentive service, meals that actually tasted like food. Kate allowed herself to relax for the first time in months, reading a mystery novel and watching clouds drift past her window. Maybe Sarah was wrong. Maybe Mike really had changed. The plane touched down at Kansai International Airport on a clear April morning, and Kate felt a thrill of possibility as she stepped into the terminal. The air smelled different here, cleaner somehow, with hints of something floral she couldn't identify. Cherry blossoms, perhaps, but the feeling didn't last long. At the hotel reservation desk, the young woman behind the counter tilted her head politely when Kate gave her name. She typed into her computer, frowned, then typed again more slowly. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams? I have no reservation under that name." Kate felt her stomach drop. "Could you check under Michael Williams? My son made the booking." More typing. The same confused expression. "I'm sorry. No reservation." Kate fumbled for her phone, but the battery had died during the long flight. She'd meant to charge it on the plane, but had fallen asleep instead. The international charging adapter was somewhere in her luggage, and her backup battery pack was dead too. "Could I use your phone to call the airline?" Kate asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. There must be some mistake. The hotel clerk was kind but firm. With no reservation and no guarantee of payment, she couldn't offer a room. Kate found herself standing on the sidewalk outside the Hotel Ritz-Carlton Kyoto, her suitcase at her feet, utterly alone in a country where she didn't speak the language. The panic started small, a flutter in her chest, a tightness in her throat. But as the reality of her situation sank in, it grew into something larger. No hotel, no phone, no way to contact Mike or anyone else back home. She tried to remember the return flight details, but Mike had insisted on handling everything digitally. "Don't worry about it, Mom. I've got it all covered." An elderly Japanese man noticed her distress and approached with a gentle smile. He spoke limited English, but understood her predicament. Through gestures and simple words, he directed her to a small family-run hostel several blocks away. The hostel was clean but basic, nothing like the luxury accommodations Mike had described. But the elderly couple who ran it were kind, offering her green tea and a small room for the night. They even had an old tablet she could borrow, with Wi-Fi access. Kate sat in the hostel's tiny common area at 2 a.m. Minnesota time, her hands shaking as she tried to log into her email account. She hadn't used it in months, preferring phone calls and handwritten notes. But slowly, the password came back to her. Her inbox contained the usual spam and medical appointment reminders, but there was no hotel confirmation from Mike, no flight itinerary, nothing about the trip at all. With growing dread, she checked her bank account. Her checking account was overdrawn. The savings account that should have contained $47,000 showed a balance of $3,200. Her credit card was maxed out and frozen for suspicious activity. Kate stared at the screen, trying to process what she was seeing. This wasn't a mistake or an oversight. This was deliberate. But the worst was yet to come. Kate's fingers trembled as she scrolled through her email history, looking for anything that might explain what was happening. That's when she found the forwarded message thread one Mike had accidentally sent to her instead of his intended recipient. The emails went back 6 months, a careful campaign to paint Kate as a woman losing her mental faculties. Mike had written to her doctor, expressing concern about her confusion and memory lapses. He'd contacted old friends, wondering if they'd noticed changes in her behavior. He'd even reached out to Adult Protective Services, asking about the process for declaring someone incompetent. She booked 2 dentist appointments in the same week and forgot about both of them. One email read, Kate remembered that week she'd made the second appointment because the first one was just a cleaning, and she'd needed a follow-up for a crown replacement. Last month she left the stove on all night, could have burned the house down. That was the night she'd made soup for Sarah, who was recovering from surgery. She'd turned the burner to low to keep it warm. Exactly as intended. She's been asking me about Dad lately, sometimes talking about him like he's still alive. This was the cruelest lie of all. Kate talked about Bob in past tense, sharing memories with Mike because she thought he'd want to remember his father. Apparently, he'd twisted even her grief into evidence of dementia. Each email built on the last, creating a narrative of decline that was completely fabricated but disturbingly convincing. Mike had been patient, methodical, and utterly ruthless in destroying her reputation. But the final email in the thread made Kate's blood run cold. It was addressed to a lawyer named Harrison Wade, dated 3 days before her birthday. The subject will be out of the country for an extended period, giving us the perfect opportunity to demonstrate her inability to manage her affairs. By the time she returns, if she returns, we'll have established clear grounds for guardianship. The property transfer documents are ready for filing. Kate read the email 3 times before its full meaning sank in. Mike hadn't sent her to Japan as a gift. He'd sent her away to isolate her, to create the very crisis he needed to justify taking control of her life. She was supposed to fail here, supposed to become confused, helpless, unable to cope, supposed to prove that she needed someone else to make decisions for her. But most chilling of all was that phrase, if she returns. As if her return was optional, as if disappearing entirely might be the preferred outcome. Kate closed the laptop and sat in the hostel's quiet common room, listening to the distant sounds of Kyoto waking up outside. For the first time since Bob's death, she felt completely alone in the world. But she also felt something else, something that started as a spark and grew into a flame rage. Pure, clean, righteous anger at the betrayal, at the months of careful manipulation, at the way Mike had weaponized other people's love and concern for her, at how he'd turned her kindness and trust into tools for her own destruction. Kate Williams had spent 72 years being accommodating, understanding, putting other people's needs before her own. She'd made excuses for Mike's coldness, his selfishness, his casual cruelty. She'd told herself that underneath it all, he was still the little boy who used to climb into her lap when he was scared, but that little boy was gone. In his place was a man who saw his own mother as nothing more than an obstacle to financial security. Well, if Mike wanted a fight, he was about to get one. Kate's first call was to David Foster, the lawyer who'd handled Bob's estate. It was 3 a.m. in Minneapolis. But David answered on the second ring, the mark of a man who'd spent his career dealing with family crises. "Kate, what's wrong?" She told him everything, speaking slowly and clearly despite her exhaustion. David didn't interrupt, didn't express shock or disbelief. He just listened with the steady calm of someone who'd seen every variety of human greed and betrayal. "How much time do we have?" he asked when she finished. "I don't know. The email mentioned property transfer documents. He could be moving on the house right now." "Not if I have anything to say about it." Kate could hear him moving around, probably reaching for clothes and car keys. "I'm going to file an emergency injunction to freeze all your assets. Can you get back here?" "I'll find a way." "Good. And Kate, you're not the first person this has happened to. We're going to fight this. And we're going to win." Kate's second call was to Sarah, who answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting. "Oh, honey, I've been so worried. Something's wrong. Isn't it?" "Very wrong." Kate filled her in quickly. "I need you to do something for me. Drive by the house, but don't stop. Just see if there are any cars there, any signs of activity." Sarah called back 20 minutes later. "Kate, there are 3 cars in your driveway. One's Mike's, but the others I don't recognize. And there are lights on in every room." Kate closed her eyes. "He's not just planning to take the house. He's already treating it like it's his." "What can I do?" "Document everything. Take photos if you can, but be careful. And Sarah, don't trust anything Mike tells you about my mental state. He's been building a case against me for months." While Sarah played reconnaissance, Kate worked on getting home. The hostel owners helped her contact the airline, but there was no return ticket in her name. Mike had bought her a one-way ticket to Japan and nothing else. Using the last $3,200 in her savings account, Kate booked the first available flight back to Minneapolis, a red-eye through Seoul, that would get her home in 36 hours. It would drain her accessible funds completely, but David had assured her the asset freeze would prevent Mike from accessing anything else. As she waited for her departure time, Kate made one final call to her niece Jennifer. "Aunt Kate, Mom said you were in Japan. How's the trip?" "Jenny, I need you to listen carefully. Your cousin Mike is trying to have me declared incompetent so he can take control of my finances. I'm flying home tonight to stop him." The silence on the other end stretched so long, Kate thought the call had dropped. "Jenny, I'm here. I'm just processing. Mike called last week asking about your condition. Said you'd been acting strange, forgetting things." "What did you tell him?" "The truth that you seemed fine to me. Maybe a little lonely since Uncle Bob died, but not confused or anything." Jenny paused. "Aunt Kate, how can I help?" "Be ready to testify if needed. And Jenny, when this is over, I'm changing my will. You're going to inherit the house." Kate meant it as reassurance, but she could hear Jenny crying on the other end. "I don't care about inheritance. I just want you to be safe." That night, as Kate's plane lifted off from Kansai Airport, She looked down at Kyoto's lights fading below and made herself a promise. She'd spent her whole life being reactive, responding to other people's needs and demands. But not anymore. Mike thought he was hunting prey, but he was about to discover he'd cornered a predator instead. Kate's plane touched down at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport at 6:47 p.m. on a gray April evening. She'd managed to sleep a little during the long flight, but her body was still running on Tokyo time, and everything felt surreal and disconnected. The taxi ride to her house gave her time to prepare mentally for whatever she might find. David Foster had called during her layover in Seoul to report that he'd successfully filed the emergency injunction, but warned her that Mike might not know about it yet. "Be careful, Kate. Desperate people do desperate things." As they turned onto her quiet street, Kate saw immediately that Sarah's report had been understated. There weren't just 3 cars in her driveway, there were 5, plus a small moving truck parked at the curb. Her heart sank as she realized what she was seeing. Mike wasn't just occupying her house. He was emptying it. "Let me out here," she told the taxi driver, stopping 2 houses away. She paid the fare and walked slowly toward her home, pulling her suitcase behind her and trying to look like a neighbor returning from vacation. Through the front windows, she could see people moving around her living room, strangers packing her belongings into boxes, treating her possessions like inventory. The sight of it made her physically sick. But worse was what she could hear: laughter. Mike's voice carried through the evening air, cheerful and relaxed. "We'll have everything cleared out by tomorrow. The estate sale company can handle the furniture, but I want the jewelry and artwork." A woman's voice responded. "What about when she comes back?" "She won't." Mike's laughter had a cold edge. "Even if she manages to get home, she'll be in no condition to cause problems. 3 days in Japan with no support, no money, no phone. She's probably in a hospital or police station right now, proving everything we've said about her mental state." Kate crept closer, using the landscaping to stay hidden. Through the dining room window, she could see Mike directing 2 men in work clothes as they wrapped her good china, the set she and Bob had received, as a wedding gift. "What about the neighbors?" one of the men asked. "Already handled," Mike replied. "I've been preparing them for months. They all know Mom's been struggling with dementia. If anyone asks, we're just keeping her things safe while she gets treatment." Kate felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Minnesota weather. Mike hadn't just planned to isolate her, he'd systematically destroyed her reputation in her own neighborhood. Even if she proved her competence legally, the court of public opinion had already convicted her. She was still trying to process the scope of his betrayal when her phone rang. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet evening, and Kate fumbled to silence it, but it was too late. "Did you hear that?" Mike's voice carried through the window. Kate tried to move away from the house, but her suitcase caught on a root and tipped over, scattering its contents across the lawn. As she scrambled to collect her things, the front door opened. "Well, well," Mike said, stepping onto the porch with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Look who made it home." The next few minutes felt like a carefully choreographed dance of deception. Mike's entire demeanor changed the moment he saw Kate, shifting from predatory confidence to concerned son with the ease of a practiced actor. "Mom, thank God you're okay. We've been so worried." He rushed down the porch steps, his face a mask of relief and concern. "When you disappeared from the hotel in Japan, we thought something terrible had happened." Kate stared at him. "Disappeared from the hotel. The management called when you never checked in. They said you seemed confused, disoriented. We've had people looking for you for 3 days. It was masterfully done. Anyone listening would hear a devoted son explaining his mother's concerning behavior. But Kate could see the calculation behind his eyes, the way he was already spinning her return into evidence of her instability. "That's not what happened. Mike..." "Mom, you're exhausted. Let's get you inside, and I'm not going inside. Kate kept her voice level, but her hands were shaking. Not while strangers are packing up my belongings. Mike glanced back at the house, where the workers had stopped to watch the drama unfolding on the lawn. We're just keeping your things safe, Mom. Until you're feeling better. I feel fine. You disappeared in a foreign country. You missed your return flight. You've been gone for 3 days with no contact. His voice carried just the right note of patient concern. That's not fine. One of the workers came to the door. Should we keep packing? Yes, Mike said quickly. Everything needs to be secured. No, Kate said, louder. This is my house. Those are my things. I want everyone out. Mike put a gentle hand on her arm, and Kate realized with horror that he was positioning himself so that anyone watching would see a caring son restraining an agitated mother. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. You need help. That's when Kate saw the car pulling into her driveway, a sedan with Hennepin County Mental Health Services stenciled on the side. Mike had planned this moment, had prepared for her return by arranging to have her immediately evaluated and potentially committed. Dr. Patricia Reeves emerged from the car. A woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She'd clearly been briefed on the situation. Mrs. Williams, I'm Dr. Reeves. Your son asked me to come check on you. He's been very worried. Kate felt the trap closing around her. Everyone here, the workers. The neighbors who had started gathering. Even Dr. Reeves had been told the same story. Kate Williams was a confused elderly woman who needed protection from herself. I don't need a psychiatric evaluation, Kate said, fighting to keep her voice calm. I need to call my lawyer. Of course, Dr. Sell, Reeves said soothingly. But first, let's just talk. Your son tells me you've been having some memory issues. My son is lying. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Kate saw Mike's face change slightly, a flicker of annoyance before the concerned expression returned. Mom, that's the confusion talking. You know I only want what's best for you. What's best for me is to be left alone in my own house. Dr. Saul, Reeves made a note on her clipboard. Mrs. Williams, can you tell me what year it is? 2024, April 15th. The cherry blossoms are blooming in Kyoto, where my son sent me with no hotel reservation and no return ticket. Kate looked directly at Dr. Reeves. He's trying to have me declared incompetent so he can steal my house. Another note. That's a very serious accusation. Do you have any evidence of that? Yes, email records showing months of lies about my mental state. Financial records showing unauthorized access to my accounts. Legal documents prepared in advance of this trip. Kate could see she was making an impression on Dr. Reeves. But Mike was ready with his counter-argument. She's been paranoid lately. Thinks everyone's plotting against her. Last month, she accused the mailman of stealing her mail because she forgot she'd asked me to collect it while she was having her driveway repaired. It was another lie, expertly crafted and impossible to disprove on the spot. Kate felt her credibility crumbling in real time. Dr. Reeves, she said desperately. Please call my lawyer, David Foster. He has documentation of everything I'm telling you. We will, Dr. Reeves said. But right now, I'm concerned about your immediate safety. You seem agitated, and I'm agitated because strangers are stealing my belongings while my son gaslights me. The raised voice was a mistake. Kate saw it immediately in everyone's faces, the workers exchanging glances, the neighbors whispering, Dr. Reeves making more urgent notes. Mrs. Williams, I think it would be best if you came with me for a brief evaluation, just to make sure you're okay. And Kate realized with crystal clarity that this was the moment. If she got into that car, If she allowed herself to be taken for evaluation, it would be used as evidence that she was indeed incompetent. Mike's plan would succeed not through legal maneuvering, but through her own apparent inability to cope with stress. She was about to protest when another car pulled up. This one she recognized. David Foster emerged with a briefcase and an expression that could have frozen Lake Minnetonka in July. "Dr. Reeves," David said without preamble. "I'm David Foster, Mrs. Williams' attorney." "I have a court order here that may interest you." He handed her a thick folder. "Emergency injunction filed this morning, freezing all of Catherine Williams' assets and barring any changes to her living situation without court approval. Any attempt to remove Mrs. Williams from her home or declare her incompetent without proper legal proceedings is now prohibited." Kate watched Mike's face go pale. "You can't." "I can and I have." David turned to the workers in the house. "Gentlemen, you need to stop packing immediately and return any items you've already loaded. This is now a legal matter." Dr. Reeves studied the documents. "This appears to be in order. Mr. Williams, you didn't mention there were legal proceedings underway." "Because there shouldn't be," Mike said, his composure finally cracking. "She's obviously not competent to. She flew to Japan alone, navigated a foreign country without local currency or language skills, identified a fraudulent scheme, contacted legal counsel, and returned home to defend her interests." David interrupted. "Does that sound like incompetence to you?" For the first time since arriving home, Kate felt like she could breathe. David continued his methodical dismantling of Mike's case. "Dr. Reeves, I have emails here from Mr. Williams to various family members and medical professionals outlining what he claims are his mother's cognitive deficits. However, when we check the dates against Mrs. Williams' actual activities, volunteer work at the library, book club participation, managing her household finances, we find a pattern of deliberate misrepresentation." Mike tried one last desperate gambit. "She's been coached. Someone's put these ideas in her head. Mr. Williams," David said coldly, "are you suggesting your mother is too incompetent to manage her affairs, but competent enough to orchestrate an international conspiracy against you?" The workers had stopped packing and were openly listening now. The neighbors had drawn closer. Even Dr. Reeves looked skeptical. "I think," Dr. Reeves said carefully, "that Mrs. Williams doesn't require immediate psychiatric intervention. However, I would recommend a full competency evaluation at a later date, conducted independently." "Agreed," David said. "We welcome any legitimate assessment of Mrs. Backfired Williams' mental state." Kate found her voice. "Mike, I want you and your friends out of my house. Now. You can't just—" "Actually, she can," David said. "According to the court order, Mrs. Williams retains full control of her property pending resolution of any competency proceedings. You have no legal right to be here." The next 20 minutes were surreal. Kate watched as the strangers Mike had hired unpacked her belongings, returning her china to its cabinet, her photos to their frames. The moving truck drove away empty. Mike stood in her living room, looking lost and angry. "This isn't over. Mom." "Yes, it is." Kate's voice was steadier than she felt. "David, please make sure Mike understands the terms of the restraining order. Mr. Williams, you are prohibited from entering this property, contacting your mother directly, or making any representations about her mental state to third parties. Violation could result in criminal charges." Mike looked at Kate one last time, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before, fear, not concern for her, but fear of consequences for himself. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "No," Kate replied. "You will." After everyone left, Kate sat in her kitchen with David and Sarah, drinking tea from her rescued china cups. The house felt different, not just because it had been violated, but because she had defended it. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go on the offensive," David said. "We document everything, file charges for elder abuse and fraud, and make sure this never happens to anyone else." Kate nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She was thinking about the woman she'd been just a week ago, passive, accommodating, grateful for any attention from her son. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who understood that survival sometimes required drawing lines in permanent ink. Outside, her rose garden was just beginning to bloom, winter-hardy survivors reaching toward the spring sun. The next morning brought a parade of people to Kate's door, but for the first time in years, they were people she'd invited. David Foster arrived early with a paralegal and a court reporter to take depositions. Sarah brought coffee and moral support. Jennifer, Kate's niece, drove up from Rochester with her husband Tom, both offering to help however they could. "Aunt Kate, I can't believe Mike did this to you," Jennifer said, holding Kate's hands across the kitchen table. "I mean, I knew he'd been struggling financially, but this—" "The money problems explain the desperation," David said, reviewing his notes. "But the level of planning, the systematic character assassination that took real calculation." Kate found that talking about it helped diminish its power over her. Each detail shared was like pulling a thorn from an infected wound. "The hardest part," she admitted, "was realizing how long it had been going on, the subtle comments about my memory, the way he'd help me with tasks I didn't need help with, the concerned looks when I made perfectly normal mistakes." "Classic gaslighting," David said. "He was conditioning everyone around you to see confusion where there was competence." They worked through the morning documenting the evidence, the email trails, the financial irregularities, the fake hotel reservations. By noon, they had enough material to file criminal charges for elder abuse, fraud, and attempted theft. But the legal victory felt hollow when Kate considered what she'd lost. Not money or property, those could be protected. She'd lost the son she'd thought she had, the man she'd believed would someday appreciate her sacrifices and love her in return. "You know," she said to Sarah as they walked through the garden that afternoon, "I keep thinking about when Mike was little, how he used to help me plant these roses, getting dirt under his fingernails and chattering about everything and nothing. What happened to that little boy? Kate deadheaded a spent bloom, making room for new growth. I think he died the same day his father did, and instead of helping him grieve, I just tried to fill the empty space with more giving, more accommodating. I taught him that I had no value except as a resource to be consumed." The insight surprised her with its clarity. She'd spent 12 years blaming herself for Mike's coldness, wondering what she'd done wrong as a mother. But now she understood that her mistake hadn't been insufficient love. It had been love without boundaries. That evening, Kate made a difficult phone call to Mike's wife, Amanda. "Kate, oh my God, I heard about what happened. I'm so sorry. I had no idea Mike was... How are you doing? Honey, how are the kids?" The question seemed to catch Amanda off guard. We're staying with my mother. Mike's been under so much pressure lately, and when he told me you were traveling, I thought maybe some space would help him figure things out." Kate heard the exhaustion in her daughter-in-law's voice, the careful way she avoided directly criticizing Mike. "Amanda, did you know about the financial problems?" A long pause. "Some of them. The business failing, the mortgage issues. But I didn't know about the other stuff. Taking money from your accounts, lying about your mental state." Amanda's voice cracked. "I'm ashamed that I didn't see it sooner. You're not responsible for his choices. Neither are you, Amanda said firmly. Kate, I want you to know whatever happens between Mike and me, you're still part of our family. The kids love their grandmother, and I won't let his problems destroy that. After they hung up, Kate sat in her living room looking at photos of her grandchildren. 8-year-old Lucy with her gap-toothed grin. 10-year-old Sam building sandcastles on their last beach vacation. Would she lose them too? Would Mike's bitterness cost her the next generation's love? She was still contemplating this when her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw a man in his 30s she didn't recognize, holding an envelope. Mrs. Williams, I'm Detective Marcus Johnson with the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. I have a warrant here for Michael Williams' arrest. Kate opened the door, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. He's not here. We know. We're serving the warrant at his residence. I just wanted to inform you that we're taking your case seriously. Elder abuse is a felony in Minnesota. After the detective left, Kate called David with the news. Good, he said. But Kate, you should know Mike's lawyer contacted me this afternoon. He wants to negotiate a plea deal. What kind of deal? Full restitution of all financial damages, a formal apology, and agreement to have no contact with you for 5 years. In exchange, we'd drop the criminal charges. Kate considered this. What do you recommend? Honestly, take it. A trial would be emotionally exhausting, and there's always a risk with juries. This way, you get your money back and guaranteed peace. That night, Kate made her decision. She called David back and agreed to the plea arrangement. With one addition, Mike would be required to undergo counseling for his gambling and financial problems, not as punishment, but as a requirement for any future contact with his children. Some battles, she realized, were won not through total victory, but through strategic mercy. 2 weeks later, Kate Williams walked into her first art therapy session at the Minnetonka Community Center with the nervous energy of a woman trying something completely new. At 72, she'd decided it was time to discover who she was when she wasn't defined by other people's needs. I haven't painted since high school, she confessed to the instructor, a cheerful woman named Carol who wore paint-splattered aprons like badges of honor. Perfect, Carol said. No bad habits to unlearn? Kate chose watercolors and found herself drawn to painting the view from her kitchen window, the lake beyond her garden, the roses Bob had planted, the oak tree where Mike used to swing as a child. But as she worked, she realized she was painting from memory, capturing the house as it had been during happier times. Tell me about this place, Carol said, studying Kate's careful brushstrokes. It's home, Kate said simply. The first place that was ever really mine. And now, Kate added a splash of yellow to represent the morning sun. Now it's still mine, but I'm learning that ownership isn't just about having the deed. It's about having the right to say no. The weeks passed in a rhythm of small discoveries. Kate joined a book club at the library, not as a volunteer, but as a participant. She took up swimming at the community pool, something she'd loved as a young woman but had abandoned when motherhood consumed her time. She even went on a few dates with a retired teacher named Frank Morrison, who made her laugh and never once tried to manage her life for her. You seem different, Sarah observed one afternoon as they sat on Kate's porch watching boats drift across the lake. Lighter, somehow. Kate considered this. I think I'm finally growing into myself. For so long, I was Bob's wife, then Mike's mother, then Mike's burden, but I was never just Kate. And how does Kate feel about Mike? It was a question Kate had been avoiding, but now she faced it honestly. Sad. Not angry anymore. Just sad for all the years we wasted pretending we had a relationship when what we really had was a transaction. Mike had completed his plea agreement requirements, returning the stolen money and signing documents relinquishing any claim to Kate's estate. The formal apology had arrived by certified mail, 2 typewritten paragraphs that managed to express regret without accepting responsibility. Kate had read it once and filed it away. More meaningful was the letter that came from Amanda 3 months later. Kate, I wanted you to know that Mike is getting help, real help, not just the court-mandated counseling. He's finally admitted that he's had a gambling problem for years, long before the business failed. The Japan plan wasn't the first time he'd tried to solve money problems by taking from family he borrowed against my jewelry. Took money from the kids' college funds. I'm filing for divorce, but I wanted you to know it's not because of what happened with you. That was just the wake-up call I needed to see how sick he'd become. The letter continued with news about the grandchildren, updates about school and sports and summer plans. Amanda asked if Kate would like to see them, maybe take them for a weekend at the lake house. Kate called immediately to say yes. The last time Kate saw Mike Williams was on a crisp October morning at Riverside Cemetery, where they'd both come to visit Bob's grave. Kate had been expecting solitude. It was a Tuesday morning, and she'd brought fresh chrysanthemums to replace the faded summer flowers. She was kneeling beside the headstone, telling Bob about Lucy's soccer season and Sam's interest in astronomy, when she heard footsteps on the gravel path behind her. "Hello, Mom?" Kate didn't turn around immediately. She finished arranging the flowers, brushing a few fallen leaves from the granite surface. When she finally stood and faced her son, she was struck by how much he'd changed. Mike had lost weight, and there were new lines around his eyes. He looked like a man who'd been forced to see himself clearly for the first time in years. "Hello, Michael?" They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them like fog. "I've been wanting to talk to you," Mike said finally. "To apologize, really apologize, not just the legal stuff my lawyer wrote." Kate waited. She'd learned the power of silence, of not rushing to fill uncomfortable spaces with reassurance. "I know what I did was unforgivable," he continued. "I convinced myself I was protecting you, but really I was just trying to solve my own problems at your expense. And I know saying sorry doesn't undo the damage. No, it doesn't." Kate agreed quietly. Mike's face crumpled slightly. "I miss him too. You know, Dad every day. And I think I blamed you for being alive when he wasn't, which is insane and cruel, but I was so angry for so long. And you were the only target left." It was the most honest thing Mike had said to her in years, maybe ever. Kate felt a stirring of something that might have been pity, or recognition, or the ghost of maternal love. "Your father would be ashamed of what you did to me," she said. "But he'd be proud that you're finally admitting it." Mike nodded, tears starting down his cheeks. "Can you ever forgive me?" Kate looked at her son, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time since Bob's death. She saw the boy he'd been, frightened and grief-stricken, but she also saw the man he'd chosen to become, calculating and cruel. Both versions were real, and both were part of the truth. "I forgive you for being in pain," she said carefully. "I don't forgive you for choosing to inflict that pain on others. The difference matters. What does that mean for us?" Kate had been dreading this question, but now that it was asked, the answer came clearly. "It means you're my son, and I love you. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. I won't be part of your life unless you can demonstrate, not promise, but demonstrate that you've truly changed." "How do I do that?" "That's for you to figure out. I'm done managing other people's emotional growth." Mike stood there for a moment longer, then bent to place his own flowers, white roses, beside Bob's headstone. "I love you," Mom, I know I've got no right to say that anymore, but I do. Kate watched him walk away, disappearing into the maze of headstones and memories. She felt sad, but not broken, disappointed but not devastated. For the first time in their relationship, she'd spoken her truth without worrying about his reaction. That evening, she called Amanda to check on the kids and mentioned the cemetery encounter. "How do you feel about seeing him?" Amanda asked. "Free," Kate said, surprising herself with the word. "For years, I've been carrying the weight of our broken relationship, trying to fix something that wasn't mine to repair. Now I know I can love my son and protect myself from him at the same time." Epilogue. 6 months later, Kate Williams stood in her kitchen on a bright March morning, watching the sunrise paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. The roses in her garden were just beginning to show their first buds, survivors of another Minnesota winter, ready to bloom again. The house felt different now, not just because she'd changed the locks and installed a security system, but because it had become a sanctuary rather than a burden. She'd repainted the living room in warm yellows and blues, colors that made her smile instead of matching what she thought others expected. Her morning routine had evolved too. Coffee first, then 20 minutes of stretching exercises recommended by her physical therapist. She'd started taking better care of her body, recognizing it as the vessel that would carry her through whatever years remained. The kitchen table was covered with wedding planning materials. Jennifer, her niece, was getting married in June, and Kate was hosting the rehearsal dinner at the lake house. It would be the first major family gathering since the incident, as everyone politely called it. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Sarah had asked when Kate first proposed the idea. "It's a lot of work, and if Mike shows up—" "Mike won't show up," Kate had said confidently. "And if he does, I'll handle it." That kind of certainty was new for her. Not aggressive or confrontational, just clear about her own boundaries and confident in her ability to maintain them. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Amanda. "Kate, I wanted to give you a heads up. Mike called last night asking if he could attend Jenny's wedding. I told him that wasn't my decision to make." Kate felt the familiar flutter of anxiety, then consciously breathed through it. "What did you tell him? That he'd have to talk to you directly?" "Good. Thank you for not making the decision for me." After they hung up, Kate sat with her coffee and considered the possibility. 6 months ago, the thought of seeing Mike would have sent her into a spiral of worry and preparation. Now, she simply wondered what she wanted to do and why. Did she want Mike at the wedding? The honest answer was no, not because she was afraid of him anymore, but because his presence would shift everyone's attention to their drama instead of Jennifer's celebration. Some boundaries were about protection, others were about peace. When Mike called that afternoon, Kate answered calmly. "Hi, Mike. Mom, I was wondering. I know it's probably too much to ask, but I'd really like to be at Jenny's wedding. She was always special to me, and I promise I wouldn't cause any problems." "I'm sure you wouldn't intend to," Kate said. "But your presence would be a distraction from Jennifer's day, and I won't let that happen. Maybe if we talked beforehand, worked things out." "Mike, we don't have anything to work out. You made choices. I responded to them, and now we're living with the consequences. That's not a problem to be solved. It's just reality." The silence stretched between them. "Finally," Mike spoke again. "I miss you, Mom." "I know," Kate said gently, "but missing someone isn't the same as being ready to have a healthy relationship with them." After she hung up, Kate felt the familiar sadness, but also something new pride in her own clarity. She'd spoken her truth without cruelty, maintained her boundary without guilt. The wedding was beautiful. Jennifer radiated joy as she danced with her new husband while the sun set over Lake Minnetonka. Kate sat at a table with old friends and new ones, watching her family celebrate without drama or tension. Later that evening, as the last guest departed and Sarah helped with cleanup, Kate found herself alone on the dock behind her house. The lake reflected the stars, and the air carried the scent of her blooming roses. "You did good today," Sarah said, joining her with 2 glasses of wine. "We all did good." And they sat in comfortable silence. 2 women who'd learned that survival wasn't just about enduring hard times, but about choosing joy when it was offered. "Any regrets?" Sarah asked. Kate considered the question seriously. Did she regret losing her son? Yes. Did she regret standing up for herself? Not for a second. "I regret that it took me 72 years to learn that loving someone doesn't mean disappearing for them," she said finally. "But I don't regret learning it at all." A loon called across the water, its voice haunting and free. Kate listened until the sound faded, then stood to go inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and choices, but she would meet them as herself, whole, worthy, and unafraid. In her garden, the roses continued their ancient cycle of growth and rest, thorns and blooms, surviving whatever winter brought because they knew that spring always returned to those patient enough to wait for it,